This is the 4th generation Skoda Octavia that was launched in India earlier this year. It's a car that actually needs no introduction, but we're going to give you one anyway because that's how we roll at CarWale. Launched in 2001, the Octavia was the car that opened the innings for Skoda in India, and over multiple generations has become wider, longer, and with each generation showcasing many first-in-segment features. But 20 years is actually a really long time, and the world that the first Octavia entered into is very different from the world that this car has entered. Many of its contemporaries have left, and in their place has come an SUV onslaught that has cars flying off the shelf by the dozen. Now, the Octavia and the Superb are so much more. They're a showcase of Skoda's global products. In that light, we're going to see today if the Octavia has what it takes to stand up against the competition in the D segment. Now, we're going to be doing this review in two parts. In the first part, I'll be telling you about the interior, exterior and feature list, while in the second part, my colleague Bilal
will be telling you all about the engine, performance and ride and handling. Now before we begin, do remember to like, share and subscribe our CarWale YouTube channel, and do let us know in the comments below how do you like this video.
The face of the Skoda Octavia is easily its most recognizable trait, and in this 4th generation has grown wider and longer. One of the first things you notice is that Skoda has ditched the split headlamp unit of the 2017 facelift in favor of these rectangular units. Now, the headlamp shape, if you notice, is quite common across the entire Skoda range and has these crystal-like elements which Skoda says pays tribute to the Czech glass industry. Next most recognizable thing are these bulge lines on the bonnet, which have become softer, and because the car has become wider and longer, they still do lend a muscular stance to the vehicle. Now, third in line is of course Skoda's signature grille, which has become wider with the vehicle but a little more subtle and now looks premium thanks to this chrome surround that sits below the Skoda logo. Lastly, this bumper element has not changed from the previous vehicle, but because the car has become larger, so has the bumper. Restrained European subtlety, those are perhaps best terms I can use to describe this 4th generation Octavia in profile view. The heavily flared wheel arches and forward-leaning stance have been dialed back, but you still get a strong shoulder line, lending some sportiness to the overall profile of the vehicle. This being a top-spec model, you get the L&K badging on the side, as well as these very busy-looking 17-inch alloy wheels that Skoda has termed Pulsar Black. They are very un-Skoda-like compared to the previous vehicles, but are still quite eye-catching nonetheless. While the face and side of this 4th generation Skoda Octavia has changed quite a bit, the rear is more of an evolution from the previous model. The car has become wider and longer, and so has the rear, and you get more rounded elements. Highlights here include this large Skoda badging here under the lip spoiler, the Octavia badging here, and of course this large glass house which extends as one big piece thanks to this car being a notchback shape. Overall, the appearance of this 4th generation Skoda Octavia is an evolution from the previous car and does help it lift up. And because the Octavia is kind of unique in the segment, it is going to stand out. Minimalist yet purposeful, that's perhaps the best way to describe the cabin of this new 4th generation Skoda Octavia. You get everything in a vertically stacked layout, and the whole cabin has been trimmed out in beige over black, which has kind of been the mainstay of the Octavia lineup over the last few years. Everything feels high quality in terms of fit and finish, and ergonomics also is spot on, with everything falling easily to hand. Now, as is the case with most cars in the segment these days, you get two big screens dominating the dashboard. This one on the right is the full digital instrument cluster, which Skoda has termed virtual cockpit, while this one on the left controls the infotainment screen. The virtual cockpit displays a variety of information, high quality display, and can be controlled via these scroll wheels and buttons on the steering wheel. And one of the things we really liked about the virtual cockpit since it was introduced in the 2017 facelift is that the instrument cluster gets the classic Skoda dials but in a digital format, giving you a kind of mix of both worlds of Skoda. The infotainment screen is a 10-inch unit and gets all the usual features like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Mirror Link, as well as connected car technology via the My Skoda Connect app. But also gives you information like your driving assessment and radio and weather and that kind of thing. It's basically quite an intuitive and easy unit to use in terms of quality. The seats themselves are actually quite comfortable, and with this bulky bolstering on the side, it actually holds you in place while you're munching the miles. And what's more, in this L&K trim, both the passenger and the driver get electric adjustment. That means you can find exactly the spot and height that you want, like make it actually really comfortable when you want to munch the kilometers. Now, one of the things that has happened in this part of the market, because it's SUV everywhere, you have a certain expectation of how you see the road, at what height, at what angle, because you're always driving high, right? A car like the Octavia brings you back closer to the tarmac and to that traditional driving experience, and with a large glass house all around, that despite this car not having a sunroof, you get an amazing view everywhere and gives you that really classic driving experience. Large car, lots of space. That's pretty much how the Octavia has been since it was launched in 2001, and this 4th generation car just carries on that tradition. You get more than enough knee room, shoulder room, as well as headroom, that despite the roof being curved to the back. While there is a space for a third occupant, it's more or less strictly a space for two. One, due to the high transmission tunnel, and two, these AC vents protruding out. In fact, if you look closely, you'll notice this suede-like soft material is only on this seat and the seat that I'm sitting on, and the center occupant actually gets like a harder leather, kind of signifying that it's a space for two. Now, features here include these AC vents with height adjustment, two USB Type-C charging ports, which might seem like a bit of an issue now given that you'd need a connector, but going forward everything is more or less going to switch to USB Type-C, so I don't think that's really going to be an issue. You get these two slots here on the back of the seats as a part of Skoda's Simply Clever system, which can hold your mobile phone in place. It's there for both the occupants. You get a central armrest with two cup holders, and this being a Skoda, of course, you get an access slot to the boot, and this has been a mainstay of the Octavia lineup since it was launched in the beginning. Now, one of the major selling points of the Skoda Octavia is its massive boot space achieved via this notchback design. In this 4th generation Octavia, you get loads of practical accessories, a dedicated button to push the rear seat back down, and with the rear seat back up, you get 600 litres, which is already quite huge, and with the rear seat back down, it increases to 1585 litres, which is more or less capacity for you to store whatever you want. One of the Octavia's major selling points is its feature list, especially in this fully loaded L&K variant. We have already seen the dual zone climate control system, touchscreen infotainment system, virtual cockpit and leather upholstery. In addition, you get ambient lighting, 11 speaker Canton sound system, cooled glove box, powered front seats, cruise control, auto park function. Here then is a full list of features available with both variants of the Skoda Octavia. On the safety front, this top spec model gets 7 airbags, electronic stability program, tire pressure monitoring system, as well as front and rear parking sensors. Now that we've seen what this 4th generation Skoda Octavia is like in terms of interior, exterior and features, I'm going to hand the keys over to my colleague Bilal.
Thanks, Venkat. Now let's see how the Skoda Octavia is to drive. Powering the Skoda Octavia is the familiar 2-litre TFSI petrol engine, which also does duties in the Superb and will also be seen in the upcoming Kodiaq facelift. Now, as we all know by now that there's no diesel engine in the Skoda Volkswagen family in India, and therefore the Octavia no more runs an oil burner. Power output are 188 bhp and 320 Nm, and it's all sent to the front wheels through a 7-speed DSG dual clutch automatic transmission. Another new for the Octavia is the new drive-by-wire technology. It basically means that there's no mechanical linkages below the gear selector, and all the gear shifts are being controlled by computer and electronics. Although this petrol engine has got a larger displacement than the older Octavia, the power output is almost identical to the E8888 motor. At idle, it's silent and oozes refinement with zero vibration or noise seeping into the cabin. And the smooth nature is retained throughout the rev range. At city speeds, there's enough grunt to keep pace with the traffic. It's friendly, progressive, and quite usable when driven with a light foot. The dual clutch DSG gearbox you get here is well known for being smooth and quick shifting, and the Octavia continues this legacy unchanged. The response is almost immediate and power delivery is remarkably linear. In unhurried driving, the motor habitually upshifts close to 1500 RPM, and the seamless DSG works up the cogs quite quickly and unannounced. Now this engine has a kind of a dual personality. Give it some beans like this, and you can hear a good resonating snarl from the engine. The rev starts climbing quickly and Octavia picks up pace and runs like a runaway bride. The only niggle you would find from the gearbox is under lower RPMs and erratic throttle response, it might give you a certain kind of a jerk, but otherwise the gearbox is kind of flawless. Although it's meant for a luxury, you can pace around with the Octavia, and the best part is you don't even realize how fast you're going in an Octavia unless you look at the speedometer.
This being an L&K trim and not a sportier sport line variant, Skoda has conveniently avoided providing any kind of driving modes here. This is a bit of a surprise because cars costing a fraction of the Octavia these days get some sort of drive mode to keep you entertained at the least. Here you do get an S mode for the gearbox and an option to turn off the traction control, and that's about it. In the S mode, the upshifts are delayed, translating to an eager throttle response. There's also a provision for manual shifting through pedal shifters, which comes in handy when there's a need for quick overtaking. In a V-box acceleration test, the Skoda Octavia managed to do a 0 to 100 km/h run in 8.29 seconds. In-gear acceleration from 20 km/h to 80 km/h took 4.64 seconds, and the 40 to 100 km/h came up in a brisk 5.53 seconds. As fast as it goes, the Octavia stops just as well too. In our tested figures, it came to a halt from 100 km/h in a brisk 3.39 seconds and within 42 meters. Despite repeated use, the 4 discs on the Octavia didn't show any signs of fade, and the strong braking performance inspired confidence to push harder. And before we move on to the ride and handling, we are sure you would be interested in knowing the fuel efficiency of the 2021 Skoda Octavia. Well, in the city, this D-segment sedan returned a fuel mileage of 7.48 km per litre. The efficiency figures improved, almost doubled on the highway, where it managed to do 14.46 kmpl.
Another lovable thing about the Octavia is its ride quality. In our road test, we have subjected it through the worst of possible terrain that we could encounter, through ruts and crater-sized potholes and ill-made speed breakers, and the Octavia has managed to glide over it so comfortably. It's a softer setup, but it doesn't wave or have a vertical movement like all the Indian-made cars do. The Octavia is certainly a European car, that is. At slow speed, the ride is comfortable. Take it to a highway and at triple-digit speed, the undulations are again taken astride with good composure. So the L&K version of the Skoda has truly impressed us with its ride quality, And doesn't matter if you are having a city run with going to office commute or dropping the kids to the school, or you're planning a long trip with the Octavia, you can do it without a second thought.
The Skoda Octavia is a low-slung sedan, and we expected it to scrape its belly on large, ill-made speed breakers. But on the contrary, the Octavia just glided over all the road surfaces we subjected it to on our road test. At higher speeds, the longer undulation were well under control and the vertical movements were kept at a minimum. The only fly in the ointment of the Octavia's recipe is its light and almost lifeless steering. It could do with some feedback, but the steering is progressive and direct once past the dead center.
In conclusion, the new Skoda Octavia continues its legacy of being a big, practical, luxurious sedan that is equally good to drive as it is to live with.
So we've spent a full day reviewing and assessing this new 4th generation Skoda Octavia. We've looked at the exterior, interior and features as well as the performance.
So Venkat, what do you like about the exterior, interior and the features of the Octavia?
So in terms of exteriors, it's a very handsome car. I mean, that's always been the case with the Octavia, right?
Right.
A very good looking car. Even though looks are subjective, that's something even you would agree with me,
but
right?
There's no replacement for a 3-box design, right?
There's especially a 3-box design like this, which in a segment full of SUVs is, I wouldn't call it a breath of fresh air, but it's refreshing to see that such a thing still exists.
Absolutely.
That has now completed 20 years. I mean, it's evolved, but 20 years of the Skoda Octavia. In terms of interiors, I like the one is the obvious one, that is there's oodles of space all around. The Octavia has always been a large car and you're never short of space in front or back. You have enough knee room, leg room.
How's it to operate the virtual cockpit or the center console? How's it to be ergonomically? How's it?
So ergonomically, everything more or less falls to place. One of the things with any touchscreen system today is that you need to get quickly to where you're going. The more paths you have to travel, the more time you're spending with your eyes off the road. This is something that's quite intuitive that way, that you can quickly get to all functions. It easily connects wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, so it's easy to connect, you get everything. Very easy to use, large display, very clear, even in bright sunlight, very easy to use. The virtual cockpit is not, it's not the most intuitive system to use. You get these scroll wheels on the steering, which can be a bit confusing at times, but it's more a question of getting used to it rather than it actually being intimidating. What about you, man? What's it like to drive, ride handling, that kind of thing, positives, negatives?
I really love the performance from the engine, the 2-liter TSI. It's not a performance-oriented engine, but it has ample amount of power, or the firepower you would say, in reserve, so you can gun it whenever you want. It's easy to maneuver in the city. It drives well on the highway. It's a mile muncher, to be honest. The overall dynamics of the car is really nice. I also love the ride quality on this because we have subjected it through worst of the conditions, through potholes, to crater-sized potholes, to ill-made speed breakers, and it just went through it very flat. Like, it absorbs everything. Its ride quality has got a very European-ness to it, if you would say.
Okay, so then on, you're saying the ride is great, engine is powerful, smooth, linear delivery. On the flip side, what didn't you like about the driving experience?
Couple of things. So, but the steering, it gives something to be desired for. Like, it's very light, it's very vague off the center, it's progressive after that, it's direct, it's linear after that, but off center it's very light, and sometimes you don't know what the front wheels are doing at point.
You associate a slight heft with a car like this,
with
right?
a car like this, exactly.
You'd expect it to weigh in a certain way.
And there's no diesel as well. The competition its direct competition is an SUV. When you're competing in a market,
SUVs actually, multiple, yeah.
And they have diesel options, most of them.
Yeah.
And if you look at the price cost these days and the cost of fuel these days,
yeah.
So having a sedan with a really low mileage of around 7 something in the city and 14 on the highway, combined mileage of around 10-12, it's not a very efficient vehicle on your pockets, right?
But then again, at this price point, I don't think fuel efficiency would be particularly high on your list, but still that's something that we can give people to think about. What are the actual rivals for this car, man?
So in the D segment SUV, we can look at the Jeep Compass, the Hyundai Tucson.
These are all diesels, right? Big diesel automatic cars.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you have driven the older diesel in the Octavia, and it's a daily investor.
It's a gem, but Skoda has chosen to go that way, and that is the way things are. Okay, so that then is our summary of the new 4th generation Skoda Octavia, and here then are the prices for both variants. For all the details on this new Skoda Octavia, do visit our website carwale.com. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.